Texas in such a religious tolerance? It's gonna be like trying to get sneakers on tool with taking sneakers off. I'm not taking my sneakers off. I am sneakers on tool. Ah, take those sneakers off. Ow! Take them all off. Ow! It's gonna be like trying to get sneakers on tool with taking sneakers off. I'm not taking my sneakers off. I am sneakers on tool. Ah, take those sneakers off. Ow! Take them all off. Ow! Texas in such a religious tolerance? It's gonna be like trying to get sneakers on tool with taking sneakers off. I'm not taking my sneakers off. I am sneakers on tool. Ah, take those sneakers off. Ow! Take them all off. Ow! Texas in such a religious tolerance? It's gonna be like trying to get sneakers on tool with taking sneakers off. I'm not taking my sneakers off. I am sneakers on tool. Ah, take those sneakers off. Ow! Take them all off. Ow! Texas in such a religious tolerance? It's gonna be like trying to get sneakers on tool with taking sneakers off. I'm not taking my sneakers off. I am sneakers on tool. Ah, take those sneakers off. Ow! Take them all off. Ow! Texas in such a religious tolerance? It's gonna be like trying to get sneakers on tool with taking sneakers off. I'm not taking my sneakers off. I am sneakers on tool. Ah, take those sneakers off. Ow! Take them all off. Ow! Texas in such a religious tolerance? It's gonna be like trying to get
It's no secret by now that FNAF has a ludicrous amount of books for being ostensibly a game series, and the quality is highly variable, ranging from genuinely really good to very mediocre to downright bizarre. A lot of the anthology stories include a lot of, random nonsense. While Tales from the Pizzaplex is less subject to this phenomenon than its predecessor, it still definitely has its fair share. However, the story we're talking about today goes far deeper than Fazgoo or Mpreg. This one is far more nefarious. On its face, B7 is a typical, pretty innocuous FNAF parable that we've come to expect from this sort of thing. Some kind of robot body horror occurs because a child is sad, and that's that. But when this story first came out, my friends and I couldn't help but notice some subtext that appeared to be there. I am prepared for this video to be contentious, probably the most contentious video I'll ever make. For what it's worth, Andrea Wagner, the writer of B7, has said that this story was not intended to be any kind of allegory for trans youth, and in her own words, she is pro-trans rights, and I'm willing to take her at her word. She's also responsible for The Mimic, Didophobia, and The Man in Room 1280, which are, in my opinion, some of the best FNAF short stories. However, she also did say that she has little leeway in what she's allowed to share when it comes to what she writes for Scott, and that her job is just to make his ideas take shape, and that's what I'm more sus of. And no, before anyone says anything, I'm not trying to make a video arguing that Scott's homophobic or whatever, but given the political climate of the past few years and how frankly insane the Republican Party has become, yeah. Scott strikes me more as a hate the sin, not the sinner type of person, which is how I think this story would come about like a misguided child rather than something more nefarious. So that doesn't surprise me too much either. Now more than ever, it's critical to look at the kind of messages the media we consume are trying to transmit. As I write this, trans rights in both the US and the UK and most of the Western world are being eroded ever more by the day, and as a member of the cult of gender ideology myself, it's my opinion that this story has far too much going on in it and too many elements at play for it to be completely benign, elements that we've been forced to become acutely aware of given the current state of things. Intentional or otherwise, B7 propagates transphobic talking points. Obligatory content warning here for transphobia and discussion of transphobic talking points. While I haven't shied away from sensitive content on this channel before, I'm making this video as the attack on trans rights reaches a crescendo. And if you come to my channel as a way to briefly escape these harsh realities, I completely understand if you want to skip this one. It is a lot. But, with all that being said, let's talk about B7, FNAF's weird transphobic allegory short story. Okay, so I want to start with a few disclaimers first. Admittedly, I'm not necessarily putting my best foot forward here. As is tradition on my channel, when I do critique videos or read-through videos or whatever, I usually like to start from the beginning and critique aspects as they come up. However, with B7, the parts that are dead ringers for the story being an allegory for trans people don't really come up until later, so I'm going to do this a bit differently. Since this is a short story, it should hopefully be fairly easy to do a quick rundown while putting pins in things that will be relevant in my breakdown. Then after that, we can dig into what this story is really trying to say. So just hold tight, we'll get to the bad stuff soon. Y'all know I hate to be the recap person, but I don't want you guys to have to suffer through this story because, aside from the undertones, it's also just pretty bad, so I will be the one to bear this burden. Also, disclaimer number 2. I didn't know where else to put this, so I'm just gonna say here that I don't know anything about B7-2 aside from cancer once again being relevant, and I don't plan to read or discuss it at all in this video. It was honestly emotionally taxing enough to read and analyze just this, and since I like myself, kind of, I will not be doing that. Without further ado, let's get into the story. Our story begins with Billy, the soon-to-be eponymous protagonist, watching Freddy and Friends as a kid. Right off the bat, we get a lot of information here. 1, we learn that Billy had to have some invasive and traumatic medical procedure done on him as a child that separated him from his parents. 2, there's a fairly noticeable strain between Billy's parents. And 3, Billy's mom compares him to his father, something that we see quite a bit in this story. Billy begins to watch the show and is beside himself with excitement. The narration tells us that he wishes he was an animatronic because they don't feel pain and are big and strong, and he then declares he's an animatronic and dances around the room. By the way, a brief aside here, this is totally besides the point, but I just want to bring up something that's always bothered me about FNAF's world building, and it's that the characters the animatronics represent are always depicted as animatronics in the diegetic marketing. Like, that's really weird, isn't it? Generally, when companies have mascots, don't they want kids to think that the costumes or animatronics are literally that character come to life? Like, it'd be like if Disney portrayed Mickey Mouse as a costume all the time. Fortunately, it seems like Security Breach has begun to rectify this with these various cartoon depictions of the Glamrocks that can be seen throughout the Pizzaplex, but still. Anyway, back on point. The next day, Billy continues his game of being a robot, and his parents continue to play along with him. His dad asks how long his mom thinks he'll be an animatronic, to which he responds he'll get bored soon enough. Later that day, when he goes to school, he gets put in timeout for pushing a girl, but continues to sing because he wasn't turned off. The teacher calls his mom to pick him up early, to which she responds by encouraging it and taking him to Freddy's for lunch. The next day, the teacher decides to facilitate his robotness by having the TA personally tutor him, and the other kids exclude him for continuing to act like a robot. That night, Billy's dad tells his mom that it's gone on too long, but she dismisses his concerns. Billy decides to adapt his technology to be that of a little boy, and this seems to satisfy everyone for a while. 6 months later, Billy is still keeping it up to his parents' growing concern. Notably, Billy's dad says, "If I'd known that show would have this effect on him, I'd never have allowed him to watch it." Put a pin in that. Also, in this same scene, he says, "Why can't he like sports like a normal little boy?" Which sure is something. His mother reprimands him for this, and then says that the psychologist Billy has apparently been seeing says that this is normal behavior and not worth stressing over. Put a pin in that as well. The scene ends with Billy's dad saying, "I wish Billy would go back to normal," and his mom saying, "Me too." The next school year, Billy transfers to a new private school, and he's almost immediately ostracized by his peers for introducing himself as an animatronic. However, the school also has a robotics class, and again, by the way, I want to know what insane person thought that teaching robotics to first graders was a good idea. I had a hard enough time suspending my disbelief for the robotics class in the movie. But anyway, here Billy learns that robots require oil to lubricate their joints, resulting in him eating less and starting to drink oil from the garage. Billy inevitably gets sick and is rushed to the hospital, whereas Billy's mom explains to the doctor that the psychologist said to play along. The compromise from the doctor is that Billy can consume olive oil. A few more years pass, and Billy's dad threatens to institutionalize him. His mom argues him on this, and still maintains that he'll give it up soon. To this, he replies, "We have a freak for a son. We have no life. We can't go anywhere or do anything with him. All we can do is sit at home and watch our little boy pretend to be a robot. That's not living, that's hell." 2 days later, he abandons the family. Yikes for me. After finishing elementary school, Billy believes that he doesn't need to go to school and can acquire knowledge just through reading, to his mother's increasing distress. The story makes a clear point of emphasizing the toll this has taken on her health and well-being. Later, he overhears a call she's having with the psychologist, where she's once again encouraged not to intervene. By his 18th birthday, Billy is still deep in his delusion. He refers to his birthday as his Creation Day, and his mom sets up a special party with a custom-made Happy Creation Day banner. The only attendees are her and his psychologist. Also, there's this weird aside about how Billy will only eat white foods because apparently the color is too overstimulating for his circuits or something. I don't know, man, this story is really reaching. After his very monochrome party, we learn that the psychologist is Billy's mom's only remaining friend, thanks to how much she's bent over backwards to facilitate Billy's lifestyle. The psychologist, actually deciding to be a competent professional for once, suggests that he be moved into a group home, but Billy's mom still refuses to take further action. Brief content warning for suicide. If you want to skip this section of the video, here's the timestamp. The next morning, Billy wakes up and finds that his mother has taken her own life. He calls 911, and the first responders are weirdly cold to him, and when one of them tries to console him, her colleague hurries her along. After this, Billy opens a file her mother said to open only in the event of her death, which is a list of protocols on how to be an adult, him having inherited a large amount of money. Alright, now we're getting into the really on-the-nose stuff. After a year of functioning like this, Billy begins to experience cognitive dissonance with his body being misaligned with his robot identity. I'm sure you can see where this is going. After calling every surgeon in the area and them all saying that the procedure he wanted wouldn't be possible, he finds a sketchy back alley unlicensed surgeon who will perform any procedure if the price is right. Miraculously, Billy somehow survives his entire thigh being cut off at once and is fitted for a prosthetic. However, he's dissatisfied with the new leg as it naturally makes him more lumbersome. Nevertheless, he continues to go ahead with the remaining surgeries, but he's still unsatisfied, and he completely loses any ability to coordinate. And it only gets worse, trust. Billy joins an online chat room for people with body dysmorphia and meets a girl named Malia, an abuse survivor he begins to develop something of a relationship with. In this section comes perhaps the most on-the-nose quote of all. When she asks why he's in the group, he tells her, "I want my body to match who I really am on the inside." Look me in the eye and tell me that the story is not about trans people. Anyway, Malia offers to meet Billy in person, and they have a first date that goes pretty well. After 3 dates, they make it official. Despite this, Billy continues with his robot-affirming surgeries, and he gets a surgery to make his face more angular. He walks so Clavicular could run, I guess. Malia no longer finds his face attractive, but Billy takes this as affirmation. He then has a procedure to make his eyes fully black, and then has his tongue replaced with this Stephen Hawking-esque voice synthesizer, and then has his ears removed. I don't know. Malia is more and more freaked out by this and begins to distance herself from him. Now, though, comes the pièce de résistance. Billy now wants to go by the name B7. He tells Malia this, and she wordlessly hangs up. I'm sorry, I know I'm not getting into it right now, but I really don't know how you could read no subtext into this whatsoever. Anyway, continuing. On his 21st birthday, B7 looks at his robotified body in all its glory, but has an epiphany. He'd been living a lie, and he feels utterly distressed with his new self. He calls the doctor, but he tells him that there's nothing to be done. He's gone too far. Billy dons his father's clothes and collapses onto the sofa, which embraces him like no human arms ever would again. That night, Billy leaves his house and goes to the junkyard, where he goes to sleep inside an abandoned station wagon. When he wakes up, the car is in a trash compactor, and Billy's body is smashed to bits, though this is the ending he wanted, as it reminded him of the human he truly was. Okay, so, where do we even begin here? I guess we might as well just start from the beginning and work our way through. For this section, I'm going to classify the conservative paradigm of transition into 4 distinct stages. Stage 1, the indoctrination. Stage 2, the alienation. Stage 3, the mutilation. And Stage 4, the epiphany. The general structure of this timeline is as follows. A, the subject, typically a child, is indoctrinated into transness by some means, typically mass media or the medical establishment. B, the subject begins a miserable path of existence for which they are implicitly blamed on account of their transness. C, the subject undergoes invasive and dangerous gender-affirming surgery. And D, the subject realizes that they've irreversibly damaged their body, leading to lifelong regret and perhaps even worse. If I, for some reason, have to explain this timeline does not reflect material reality for the vast majority of trans people. I'm trying to come at this from the transphobe's perspective. Without further ado, let's get into Stage 1, the indoctrination. Okay, so right off the bat, there's so much going on here. First of all is the mention of Billy's trauma involving his invasive surgeries as a kid. What's weird is that this really doesn't come up at all later, it's just kind of inexplicably mentioned. You could say it's like the exigence it gave him for wanting to be strong like an animatronic, but all else in mind, what came to mind for me was the idea that transness is a response to trauma. Recently, I read Redefining Realness, Janet Mock's memoir, which in my opinion should be required reading for everyone ever. In it, she, a trans woman, discusses her childhood assault. She writes, I was apprehensive about writing about being molested because I feared people would point to the abuse as the cause of my being trans, as if my identity as a woman is linked to some perversion, wrongdoing, or deviance. Obviously, Billy's medical trauma isn't the same as SA, but I think there is something to be said about people linking a misalignment with one's birth identity to trauma. People similarly talk about lesbians in this way, and to a similar extent trans men, about how they're only gay/trans because they had bad experiences with men and it's a coping mechanism or something. That can also be applied to Billy. His trans roboticism, I guess, is because he's trying to run away from those bad experiences. As Mock later writes, though, it's not that trauma precedes transness, but actually the inverse. Being a kid trying to understand your gender and sexuality makes you more vulnerable and more susceptible to people who will take advantage of you. Speaking of which, I feel like I have to mention the weird father stuff. It seems pretty explicitly written such that Billy's mom is much closer to him than his dad. He directly interacts with her more, she plays along with him until the bitter end, etc. However, Billy is directly compared to his father much more. His mother compares them both in attitude and appearance, in some very unsubtle exposition, and he dons his father's wardrobe when he has his epiphany at the end. To me, this calls to mind the association conservatives make with queerness, especially in boys, being a response to a lack of a strong masculine figure in their lives to teach them how to man correctly. This idea is only further enforced when Billy's father later abandons the family, leaving him with only his mother who facilitates his delusions. This is once again an instance of reverse causation where queer kids precede strained paternal relationships because, statistically speaking, men are more unlikely to be accepting of a queer kid, largely because of patriarchal expectations that if your child doesn't act in accordance with their birth sex, then it means you somehow failed as a parent. Another thing that we'll talk about more when we get to stage 4 is the idea that Billy has some intrinsic masculinity to him. While Billy superficially connects to his mother more, he's spiritually more similar to his father. But again, I'll save that more for stage 4. Anyway, next point. The fact that the story makes it a point that Billy is like that because he watched Freddy and Friends as a child. Honestly, this was the first thing that immediately set off all sorts of alarm bells for me when I first read it, after hearing that it was a vaguely transphobic allegory. If you're even vaguely familiar with I've said vague too many times. If you're remotely familiar with transphobic discourse online, you'll know that this is one of conservatives' favorite arguments to make, that woke kids media will make your kids gay and trans, resulting in perhaps one of the funniest arcs on Twitter in which public intellectual Jordan Peterson got into a one-sided Twitter beef with Elmo of Sesame Street fame. Another more recent example since I initially drafted this is Miss Rachel. Miss Rachel is a content creator who makes videos for very little kids, designed for watching with parents. Again, similarly to Sesame Street or Mr. Rogers. While she's primarily been under fire from the right for her open support for Palestine, they've also criticized her for, gasp, having non-binary people in her videos. For toddlers, where they sing songs about stuffed animals. There's plenty of other examples I could think of, though. Mr. Ratburn and Arthur being gay, I believe the parents of the new main human girl on Sesame Street are a gay couple, pretty much the entire existence of Steven Universe, all of these have been censored by the right. Again, I know that right now all this seems fairly benign, but I do think this groundwork is important to lay, not just because it's the cornerstone of my premise, but also for your edification, my lovely audience members. These tropes are important to recognize, especially since I learned that there's an apparent industry of conservative children's books. Obviously this isn't quite the same, but we need to look for allegory. Anyway, with this in mind, let's move on with the story and start looking at the more egregious stuff. So once Billy starts to be an animatronic in the outside world, the story demonstrates how everybody enables his delusion. His teacher has the TA personally work with him, his mother plays along until the bitter end, and his psychologist encourages all of this behavior. I think I just hit my mic. This is where things become explicitly queer-coded in my eyes, as opposed to any other possible interpretation. Many conservatives seem to think that kids are trans because of some kind of cultural rot spurred by the elites. This connects back to the point about media moral panics. Conservative dogma states that the enemy is everywhere all at once, especially public servants, i.e. public school teachers. It's for precisely this reason that far-right groups like Moms for Liberty advocate for so-called school choice. Your child could be at risk of indoctrination by the gender ideologues, by learning that gay and trans people exist, and might even be their teacher. For more information on this topic, I'd check out Zoe B's video about the right-wing war on education. So notice how the teacher doesn't punish Billy or try to snap him out of his delusions. She does not express concern to his parents. Instead, she has the audacity to accommodate for him, how dare she. Furthering on this point, I feel the need to discuss the psychologist, because what the actual f*** is this lady on? Okay, I'm sorry, but genuinely, in what world would any medical professional co-sign this behavior? A psychologist might suggest a client not go cold turkey with their delusion, but they'd certainly not just tell their parent to go along with it, no questions asked. This woman is outrageously unprofessional, and does not reflect on the median psychologist at all, let alone one whose client is a family seemingly as affluent as Billy's. The only reality this would ever occur in is one in which transness is seen as a delusion that is validated earnestly and readily by medical professionals. If you're not familiar, another node of the transphobic conspiracy web is the idea that doctors and Big Pharma are trying to trans their patients because it'd be good business, I guess. This notion is demonstrably outrageous if you ask anyone who's ever tried to medically transition. Doctors will rake you over the coals before prescribing HRT, let alone recommending surgery. However, the more sinister angle of this doctors transing kids for profit hypothesis, and the one that's at the heart of this, is everyone's favorite subject of conspiracy theories, Jewish people. This theory's primary proponent is Jennifer Billick, a certified crazy woman who believes that Jewish transgender elites are using the trans rights movement as a Trojan horse to propagate transhumanism, the belief that humans should transcend their biological limit through any means necessary, especially through technological means, and oh my god. I'm sorry, this is just coming to me as I'm writing this section. I just wanted to edify you about this, but this is literally the plot of B7, kind of, but the transhumanism part is there. Again, I'm not accusing anyone of anything, and I do sincerely doubt that Scott or Andrea deliberately tried to sneak Billick's insane beliefs into their FNAF story, nor do they believe them, at least actively, but I could not make this up. For more information on this whole web, it's a very interesting rabbit hole to go down. I really recommend this Lily Alexander video. Anyway, digression over, let's get back to my original point. With this in mind, it makes the psychologist's behavior fall into place much more. Well, not really, she's still incredibly unhinged, but through this paradigm, it makes sense why she exists the way she does in the story. If we're interpreting this as a trans allegory written from a transphobic angle, then it makes perfect sense that the psychologist is happy to play along with Billy's delusions. We have to keep in mind that this story is set in the reality that Fox News broadcasts from. And with that said, I think now is an appropriate time to move into Stage 2, the alienation. Transphobia, like most right-wing moral panics, follows the tried-and-true rhetorical tactic of, our enemies are suppressing us with their insurmountable power, but they're also incredibly weak, which is why they're bad. While Stage 1 follows the first half, Stage 2 follows the second. As Billy's condition grows more and more unsustainable, we see how he becomes more and more ostracized by society in turn. His classmates outcast him, his dad walks out of his life, his mother takes her own life, presumably due to the distress caused by all of this, the f***ing paramedics are assholes to him, and even Malia eventually abandons him. These people are framed as responding naturally, albeit perhaps rudely, to an exasperating situation, not as close-minded or anything. Billy is the one who needs to be fixed to avoid alienation. And while this is more on the fringes of the discourse, there is something to be said for how this is reflected in transphobic discourse. Libs of TikTok is a famous example of a grown woman who likes to harass children as a pastime, along with any other number of blue checks on Twitter who like to attack random trans people for fun. And don't get it twisted. For the mainstream talking heads discussing this, if they are at all, it's not coming from a place of true care. These people are not coming at this from the perspective of, how can we support these bullied kids, or how do we get these kids to stop bullying their peers, but more from this, social Darwinist kind of angle of, if you get bullied because you're trans, then stop being trans or suck it up. This survival of the fittest mentality is ultimately the cornerstone of reactionary rhetoric. Every uncomfortable or distressing emotion you feel is 100% valid, and you are allowed to show that however you want, even if it means being actively cruel to other people. Life is unfair, and that's just something you gotta deal with, and any attempt to change that, be it through transition in the case of trans people, or policy insofar as the disabled or the poor, is an exercise in folly. This also coincides with the idea of queer kids needing to suppress their identities for the sake of their family's coherence, something else we see in V7. Billy's dad ditching the family is seen, again, as the inevitable result of Billy's unmanageable and antisocial behavior, and his mother's death is framed in the same way. In fact, I would even go as far as to say that Billy's dad walking out is framed as the right decision to make. And if this story actually had any interest in empathizing with the subject, I feel like it could actually make some kind of interesting commentary here. It's an experience I, and I'm sure many other queer kids can relate to, feeling like you're the strain on your family's cohesion. I have a distinct memory of being asked why I couldn't just be a normal sibling. While the story doesn't examine this, it gets worse when it comes to extended family too, especially in one as politically diverse as mine. You feel like you're the bomb that could go off at any moment, and you living your truth could potentially spell calamity for your extended family. Since this story is set in Crazy Town, though, Billy seems to be totally unfazed by his family's isolation of him. I'll get into this a little more later, but this also mirrors conservative rhetoric, how conservatives seem to think that trans people are not acutely aware of how they're perceived. And with that, I think it's time we move into Stage 3, the mutilation. This is where we get to the most damning stuff, as in, I think you're acting in bad faith or you're hopelessly stupid if you can't see the parallels being drawn here. So after the tragic death of his mother, Billy experiences what the book describes as cognitive dissonance, but I can only describe as robot dysphoria, and begins to seek surgery to replace his limbs with prosthetics. I'm sorry, but I truly cannot pass this off as a coincidence. The nearest analog is just general cosmetic surgery, like a butt lift or something, but people generally don't get plastic surgery because they feel that their soul has a big butt. I mean, maybe they do, but typically it's to enhance a part of you, not to replace it like Billy is doing. With this in mind, let's examine how he goes about this. Billy can only get this surgery done through sketchy means, echoing sentiments you may have heard about gender-affirming surgery being experimental or uniquely dangerous. Like with any invasive surgery, gender-affirming surgery does come with certain risks, ones that are told to you at length. Again, it's not like you're flying into the ER and getting surgery apropos of nothing. In fact, my understanding is that doctors tend to move heaven and earth to discourage gender-affirming surgery. We don't live in Amelia Perez world.
Yes, 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 yes!
As for the experimental claims, ones that B7 clearly wants us to believe, they are patently untrue. As much as transphobes like to ignore it, it's a fact that trans people have always existed and will always exist. To this point, the first vaginoplasty ever was performed in Germany in 1930. Famously, the work of Magnus Hirschfeld, an early researcher and advocate for the queer community, was burned by the Nazis, marking a seminal moment in the regime's escalation, even though J.K. Rowling likes to pretend that they didn't. Anyway, suffice it to say, this is hardly novel technology. Bottom surgery predates the existence of the State of Israel. The language for it has evolved, as has the technology, but you know what else that describes? Every surgery ever. No matter its nature, surgery is not a fun thing to look at or a fun activity to partake in. Gender-affirming care is not especially draconian in any way. And despite what Maya Poet or whatever other flavor of the month detransitioner wants you to believe, doctors are not handing out bottom surgery like candy, and you most certainly couldn't find it in some weird back alley situation like the one portrayed in V7. Another thing I felt was worth noting was the procedure itself. Billy has his leg entirely amputated and replaced with a prosthetic, and while this could be a reach, it did call to mind for me the whole mainstream perception among stupid people that a vaginoplasty involves removing the penis. Every time I see someone say this, I have to laugh because it shows how uneducated they are. The genitals are actually inverted for MTF bottom surgery, no removal occurs. I don't know how else this could have been portrayed for the sake of the story, in all fairness, but I figured I'd share anyway. But that's actually more or less all I have for this section. Despite being one of the more glaring examples, I feel like there wasn't much to debunk because of how straightforward the real-world analog here is, and how blatantly false it is. Like, I don't have to put my filter over it for people to understand what this is about. There is one more thing I wanted to bring up, and it's about how Billy views Malia's losing attraction to him as affirming. The right-wing archetype of a trans person is someone who thinks they're hot shit while being hideously ugly. The ugliness being an onset of their transness could apply here. An example of this could be Mr. Garrison in South Park, or any number of trans soy jacks. The right-wing archetype of the trans person is that they're like, respect my heckin' pronouns, and always making a scene, and very loud and flamboyant. And while I'm sure that's true for some people, the majority of us just kind of want to be respected and won't make a stink unless there's a stink to make. However, I won't die on that hill necessarily, it just feels like a random addition, and I want to ascribe some meaning to it. Finally, though, it's time to discuss Stage 4, the Epiphany. Though the last section was on the nose, it only gets worse from here. Malia abandoning B7 for changing his name, I don't even know what to add here, quite honestly. Like, I really feel like it speaks for itself. Like, I don't even know what this implies, considering how backwards this whole thing is. Like, why would the surgery come before the name change? Like, I know it's because they wanted the title drop, but whatever. I will talk a bit about this whole transition regret thing, though. Of course, going with this analogy, we can assume that Billy's epiphany about his body is an analog to this. This is another very popular right-wing talking point, one especially propagated by the detrans grift market, including my personal sleep paralysis demon, Maya Poet. These people like to say that trans youth are pushed into getting life-altering surgeries that they then end up regretting, potentially to the point that the only resolution is ending their own life. The arguments against this are well documented. People who get gender-affirming surgery have remarkably low regret rates. Knee surgery has a higher rate than gender-affirming surgery. My personal favorite statistic, actually, is that Harry Potter tattoos have a higher rate of regret than gender-affirming surgery. This is not to mention that the majority, or at least the latest portions, of detrans grifters barely transitioned, to be entirely honest. I'm talking like barely HRT. A point is also made that this is damage that cannot be undone. When Billy calls the sketchy doctor, he tells him there's nothing he can do for him. Another major argument against gender-affirming surgery. This is most clearly exemplified by Abigail Schreier's disgusting book, Irreversible Damage, wherein incredibly patriarchal and high-key pedophilic arguments are used to justify why transness is evil, because it irreversibly damages little girls' sanctity. Ew! Also, something I wanted to circle back around to. I felt the need to point out that Billy wears his dad's clothes when he's having his existential crisis. Not his own clothes, his dad's. It really does feel like Billy is returning to some essential, fundamental part of himself, i.e. his masculinity. There's also this very patriarchal logic to it that children are an extension of their parents, something that also ties into the whole Abigail Schreier thing that I mentioned already. Finally, let's talk about the ending. I'm gonna put a content warning for suicide throughout this whole part. The story ends with Billy taking his own life as an act of self-actualization, a trope that already rubs me the wrong way most of the time, but it feels especially macabre as the ending to this story. As you probably know, the trans suicide and attempt rates are remarkably high, depressingly so. Right-wing commentators love to use this as a point against trans people. Look, they say, this is the inevitable result of this path. You'll be dissatisfied with yourself because you didn't need surgery, you needed to look within yourself and triumph over whatever void inside you thinks being trans will fix it. Never mind the fact that trans kids in supportive environments have much better mental health. Never mind the fact that there are plenty of trans adults who live happy, fulfilling lives and that their qualities of life went up after getting surgery. And, again, I want to point out that this is an act of self-actualization in the eyes of the book. Billy's demise isn't treated as the result of the people in his life being intolerant. It's treated as mostly a personal failing on his part. Sure, there was his mom's enablement and the sketchy doctor and such, but they were in fact the ones who were tolerant of him. If anything, the people who were tolerant were at fault. Malia's reaction to the name change is treated as the natural reaction to Billy's behavior, as I mentioned before. And that especially I will hear no excuse for. That's not even an allegory, that's literally just something that could happen in real life. Billy is the problem here, not an unaccepting society or the insane medical experts surrounding him. He needs to fix himself, and the solution to that problem is, apparently, death. that is about all I have on the story itself. That was a rough ride. It was a lot longer than I expected, also. However, this is not the end of the video yet. I also want to take a moment to explain why, with all of this in mind, I don't think that there's another allegory that really fits this story. The one major rebuttal I've heard, other than the thought terminating, "it's about nothing," is that this is a story about cosmetic surgery and unattainable beauty standards. While maybe at first brush I could understand that reading, there's so much else at play here that simply is incompatible with it. To rebut this point, I call To the Stand To Be Beautiful, a FNAF story that is actually about body dysmorphia. My first and most critical point is that when Eleanor grants Sarah her new body, she isn't outcast by her peers at all. In fact, she gets popular because of her glow-up, and indeed, Sarah becomes conventionally beautiful. Look at Billy by comparison. The further he gets into his quote-unquote transition, the weirder he looks and the more outcast he becomes. In fact, he's kind of the opposite of Sarah. Sarah wants to change her appearance to fit the beauty standard, whereas Billy wants to change his appearance in spite of what people think. In fact, he even finds it validating when people think he's unattractive. Also, Sarah's conflict starts and ends at her appearance. Sure, she undergoes a Katie from Mean Girls kind of arc, but that's a result of her becoming popular as a byproduct of her beauty. Billy pursues surgery as a result of his preeminent weirdness. Moreover, Sarah's desire to be beautiful is seen as an inherent and natural desire, and certainly I didn't need an explanation for why a teenage girl wants to be pretty. Billy's transroboticism, though, is something with a whole host of surrounding circumstances. His enabler mom, the Fazbear show, his medical trauma, the insane psychologist, the sketchy doctor. If this were a story about conventional beauty, why would we have this parade of weirdos enabling Billy? Why can't I just believe that, like Sarah, beauty is something that it's natural for Billy to want? Ultimately, what I think this comes down to is a misunderstanding of dysphoria versus dysmorphia. As I said before, people who get plastic surgery typically don't pursue it because they feel that their soul has a big butt or something. Both are cosmetic surgeries, sure, but one is to enhance rather than to replace. They don't think their bodies are wrong rather than in need of enhancement. And obligatory asterisk, I'm not saying that all trans people, or even trans people who get surgery, think their bodies are wrong. I'm just phrasing this as succinctly as possible. And certainly, there is an argument to be made that cosmetic surgeries are gender-affirming care because it makes cis people feel like they conform to the norms of their gender more. However, trying to look at this from the bigot's perspective. And lastly, I just truly cannot emphasize the name thing enough. That, to me, is the smoking gun. If all the other damning stuff isn't enough for you, what else could that possibly allude to? Because it sure as hell isn't a side effect of cosmetic surgery. So there we have it, B7, FNAF's weird transphobic allegory story. I usually like to wrap my videos up with some kind of takeaway, but I don't know what we really learned here today. Hopefully you learned some hallmarks of transphobic rhetoric to watch out for, but I don't know how to apply this to FNAF as a whole or anything, or to my life. This is partly because this story has effectively nothing to do with FNAF, but it allows me to transition, into a brief thought I've had about the weird, paradoxical nature of FNAF and Scots politics. B7 is a story that, when I look at it, I can immediately identify as having been written by a Republican in Texas. It very blatantly reads as that to me. Why I think people have a hard time seeing that, though, is because FNAF is at its core an anti-capitalist story. Sure, there are some themes I can laser point as leaning conservative, and certainly Christian, though they don't have to coincide necessarily, but the main villain of the first arc is a presumably ridiculously wealthy patriarch, one whose crimes are facilitated by a slimy corporation. FNAF 1 is a clear satire of how unforgiving minimum wage labor can be, especially in child-oriented venues. Fazbear is outrageously shady, and in the Mimic arc they've become actively hostile, willing to drug and kill a man so they can cover up their part in the deaths of Lord knows how many children. They're a pretty clear Disney analog to me as well, what with the hyper-aggressive marketing and media empire and their apparent contributions to climate change. In The Storyteller, they quite literally lay off their creative staff to replace them with AI, an alarmingly prescient plot beat. Secret of the Mimic starts with Arnold working an uninterrupted 72-hour shift. FNAF is, and always has been, fundamentally a story about how capitalism necessarily breeds, and in fact feeds, off of trauma. I can't say I'm too stunned, though. It's so frustrating because they're always so close to getting it. They see how capitalism leaves them feeling unfulfilled and hollowed out, and feel put off by the US's wasteful imperial conquests, but instead turn sharply right, thinking they'll be through patriarchal or monetary domination. So, alas, I guess. That said, that is all I have for you today. Thank you so much for watching. I know this was a rough one, but I felt like it had to be made. These tropes are important to recognize and observe, especially in the current media climate. While I hate this story and think it's terrible, though, it's not really like tarnished FNAF for me or anything, because this story is so unrelated to anything. Don't interpret this as like a cancellation video or anything. Also, now Roxy is canonically trans, more or less, so yay. I guess that counterbalances it. I would like to give special thanks to my friend Ben for proofreading this video. He was a huge help. There's another aspect of like ableism to this story too that I am not equipped to speak on, so his contributions were very helpful in that regard. As for my next video, if you didn't see my community post about it, I plan to move away from being like a FNAF channel primarily. This doesn't mean I'm going to stop talking about FNAF in general, but we're in kind of a weird, stagnant place right now, and I don't want to retread old ground or burn myself out. There's only so much I can talk about on the subject, so I'm going to move to more general, intersectional media analysis. My next project is going to be related to an internet series similar to Petscop that I've been following for a while. I'm going to try to come at it from an angle I don't think a lot of people have yet, so look out for that. But that is all I have for you today. Thank you so much for watching. If you liked the video, feel free to like and comment, maybe subscribe if you're feeling particularly frisky. I love you all, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye!
Have you ever clicked on a video that felt off? Maybe it was recommended to you late at night. Maybe the thumbnail looked strange enough that you just had to know what it was. So you watch it, then scroll through the comments, then click on a link someone posted. And before you realize it, you're an hour deep into some bizarre corner of the internet trying to figure out what you just found. And the deeper you go, the stranger things become. Because some internet rabbit holes don't just lead to weird videos or unsettling websites. Sometimes they lead to things that are genuinely horrifying. From a Ring camera capturing a little girl begging for help in the middle of the night, to a live stream where viewers become convinced a woman is being held hostage, to a website exposing thousands of unsecured security cameras to complete strangers around the world. Today, we're diving into the internet's darkest rabbit holes. Make sure you like the video and subscribe to the channel. And let's get into it. Terrifying Ring camera footage. It's November 28th, 2019. A resident of Harriet Creek Ranch, Texas, has just woken up from a deep sleep and is groggily starting their day. They're going about their normal routine: coffee, shower, breakfast, then checking notifications on their phone. Scrolling through emails, texts, missed calls. It's all things they're used to waking up to. Which is why one alert from their Ring camera app stands out to them. It says, "There is motion at your front door. Tap and hold the notification to see more." This was from the middle of the night, a time where no packages would have been delivered, no friends popping by, all neighbors had to have been asleep. They think it must have been an animal walking across the porch, or some reasonable explanation like that. But they're still curious, so they open the app to play back whatever occurred outside their door while they were sleeping. Nothing could have prepared them for what had actually happened. This was the video they saw when they opened their app.
Help, please. Please help.
It's truly gut-wrenching. Her cries are desperate. The pain in her voice is not only heartbreaking, but terrifying. I can only imagine what the owner of the Ring camera felt. Waking up to see this, realizing someone was at their door while they were in bed, someone who needed help. They immediately notified the police. Of course, that was all they could do. Turn it over to the professionals who could hopefully figure out who this girl was and save her from whatever she was running from. Give her the protection that she needs. That would be a picture-perfect ending. But with footage like that, which feels like it's straight out of a horror movie, things aren't going to be wrapped up with a neat little bow. The cops never really do figure out who this girl is, or if they do, they don't tell us. The only lead that I could see is people connecting her to a missing child case in South Dakota, a girl named Serenity Denard. Serenity had endured a difficult childhood for 9 years, suffering trauma at the hands of her biological parents until she was eventually placed in foster care and then adopted into the hands of Chad and Cassandra Denard. Here, life may have been better, but Serenity was followed by the memories of her earlier years and lashed out as a result of it. She was a very outgoing, bright, and charismatic kid. She would light up rooms and was loved by everyone around her. But her parents still faced difficulties. She would often run away and threaten that she would not come back. It was chaotic, stressful, and unsure of how to handle this behavior, Serenity was sent to Black Hills Children's Home, a treatment center for kids with behavioral issues. There's not a lot of information on her time there, but I'm going to guess things weren't fantastic because on February 3rd, 2019, Serenity ran from the group home. This was at 10:45 a.m. At 11 a.m., someone entering the facility saw her alongside the road. Unaware that this was her and she was escaping. They didn't stop. And that was the last time she was ever seen. Or was it? There are many theories about Serenity's disappearance. One of those being that she is the very girl begging for help on November 28th in Harriet Creek Ranch, captured on the Ring video. There is a resemblance between the two, and of course Serenity would be in a position where she needed help. But there are still some details that make it seem unlikely. The conclusion that police came up with for Serenity is that she got lost in the woods and eventually passed away from hypothermia. When she had run away, the temperature was below zero and she was not wearing a coat. Could Serenity have survived these conditions for very long? Well, the only way that she could have is if she ended up somewhere where she was brought inside, or with someone that brought her inside, which would also be the only way she could make it from South Dakota all the way to Texas. Otherwise, it seems nearly impossible that a 9-year-old girl could make it that far on her own. But it feels more probable that if that is what happened, whoever she ended up with probably didn't have good intentions. If they did, they would have returned her to her family, who was sick with worry. And whatever those intentions were, are what Serenity is running from in that video. But this is all speculation, because all public information on the video and on Serenity's story is severely limited. Law enforcement never really came up with an answer for either, leaving Serenity and maybe this other mystery girl helpless, lost, still in danger. Although some viewers don't actually believe danger was present in the footage, rather, it was a setup. Some people think that home invaders sent a little girl to the door, crying and pleading so that the homeowner will open up. And when they do, the robbers rush in to rob the house. It's really not a crazy theory. That does unfortunately happen often, and is something people have to be aware of when coming across a child who needs help. It's infuriating that we may have to second guess our instinct to help, to debate whether a distressed kid is actually in danger or not. But we'll never know what actually happened to this little girl. Whether she was Serenity Denard, another missing child who is on the run, or the daughter of a criminal who was using her to break into someone's home, none of those options feel reassuring. Either way, the victim is always the child. And this one was never identified by law enforcement, leaving us all to wonder where she ran off to at the end of the video, and hoping she's okay. Instacam. Every second of every day, there is someone on their knees talking to whatever higher power they believe in. God, Buddha, Zeus, Allah, whatever it is, someone is praying to it right now. Maybe they're whispering to themselves or alongside a friend, a community even. Either way, it's intimate, personal, sacred. But now imagine that moment from a bird's eye view. Someone deep in a conversation with God. They're vulnerable. They're needing help, guidance, and faith. Imagine that person is you, and you're being watched. Not from a stalker or a creepy person lurking somewhere nearby, but from a camera. It's perched in a corner, somewhere you didn't think to look. Or maybe you did, but you thought nothing of it. It's only for security, you thought. It's there for protection, to watch my back in case something happens. But what if someone is using it for more than that? What if someone is watching, observing quietly, keeping tabs on you? What if actually that seemingly innocent camera gives access to anyone who wants it. Just a simple click onto the website Instacam, and your private moment is gone. It's turned to something else entirely. A movie people don't even have to pay for to watch. This is an example of only one scene from the Instacam website. It comes from a live camera in Louisville, Kentucky. Or if you wanted to get more specification, the website tells you everything about it. Watching it myself feels creepy. It feels invasive. It feels wrong. Like I said, the camera is live, so it changes, but I've checked back on it a couple of times and either there's no one there or it's a different person. Each time someone new is at the altar. They're often there for a while, taking their time with prayer, and all the while, I am, or some other random person is silently watching them from across the country. It feels gross. I can only watch for so long before exiting the page and finding something normal to watch. Something that doesn't feel illegal. But while it may feel that way, Instacam is perfectly legal. On the FAQ section, there's the question of this being a product of hackers. Instacam says, these cameras are not hacked. All cameras listed on the site do not have any password protection. They also clarify that anyone who wants their camera removed can do so, but with some stipulations. If you want to leave your surveillance camera public accessible but want to remove it from this site, send the URL of your camera to email from contact section, but remember that your camera still will be available to all internet users that use surveillance camera search software and sites like another website. The only solution to make your camera private is to set up a password. And that's where the loophole of all this comes in. They aren't breaking any rules. Everything on the website is from public cameras. So a lot of that does mean cameras that record and monitor things that are public activity, like for security purposes inside of a business or office, or to watch traffic at a busy intersection. There's many of these floating around, but dispersed in between these usually boring live streams, there's one or two that don't feel so public. Some are right outside someone's home, watching their driveway, like this one. It seems to be on a property that's otherwise very isolated. Whoever lives here wants their life to feel undisturbed, quiet, private. They moved into this house for all of those reasons. The only one thing they forgot, though, is to set a password on their security camera. Maybe they're old, or they didn't fully read the instructions, or they just didn't understand the point of setting a password. They didn't realize something like Instacam even existed. Now their peaceful driveway, yard, or life has been corrupted by a broadcast that anyone has access to. But it goes beyond just the outside. There are some instances of camera feeds located inside the homes, or, as one Reddit user notices, pointing inside homes. One Reddit user posts, I found a stream of a camera that's being used to peep into people's windows. I found this stream on Instacam. The camera is being actively monitored and controlled, with someone deliberately finding lit up windows and zooming in to spy on people inside of a large apartment complex. They are particularly focused on one window that seems to be the bedroom of a younger woman. I tracked the stream to a latitude and longitude outside of Pennsylvania, United States. I'm not going to say the city. Right outside of the airport. But after watching the stream for a bit and seeing it zoom out, I noticed it quickly pan over to a newly opened White Castle next door to a Star Care pharmacy directly in front of the building that's being peeped on. After doing some digging on Google Maps, I discovered that this apartment complex is located in Jamaica, New York, and the person peeping on people is almost certainly located in the apartments across the way. I was thinking about seeing if I could find a neighborhood group for the apartment complex to let people know, even if that sounds kind of extra. Is there anything else that can be done? While it is sort of relieving that Instacam can serve a useful purpose of noticing such a horrific thing as this, it is still so horrifying that this is on the internet to begin with. Not only are there people with their own cameras who are unaware that they are being watched, but also people who don't know that this camera even exists to begin with. For this one in particular, no one really comes up with an exact answer on who's behind it or how to stop it. One commenter links what they think is the stream that OP is referring to, which I'll mention is now unavailable. Thank God. Hopefully that means it was taken down. But under that comment is someone that pretty much sums up how terrifying it really is. They say, if this is the one OP is talking about, and it does seem likely, then the person controlling it literally could be anyone. If you click the stream directly, it takes you to the camera's direct link and includes live controls for anyone to use. So honestly, it seems like Instacam points to a much larger issue outside of its already creepy nature. It's a host to thousands of unsecure cameras, protected by nothing. These views into our everyday lives are available to whoever wants it. It may even be considered lucky to see ourselves on Instacam, so that way we're aware we're being watched. But it's a huge site. There's over 2,000 live feeds on there at one point, and even with the ability to search by location, it feels impossible to scour through everything. And it updates every day. Every day, there's a new shot of someone else's life. Small details that feel so vulnerable. Moments that we hold close to our chest. Things we wouldn't dare share with even our closest friends. All out in the open, on full display, public for anyone's viewing pleasure. It's disturbing and feels distressing to even think about. But because all of it remains legal, not much is going to change anytime soon. So, at the very least, if you have a camera inside or outside your house, now is probably a good time to make sure it has a password. Yvette's bridal. One of the most stressful parts of getting married is finding the perfect dress. It's something brides will spend weeks and lots of money on in order to find a perfect match. The process is long, tedious, exhausting, but of course, still exciting. And for newly engaged couples in Panama City, Florida, the journey for the right dress may take a quick detour if they come across one specific bridal shop that stands out from all the rest, like a sore thumb. It's impossible to miss when in eyesight. Mixed in with all of the cute and fancy shops, this one is different. It's out there, and it's hard to tell if it's a good or bad thing. Welcome to Yvette's Bridal. They are open until 6 p.m., and more importantly, they are here to serve you, as their website makes very clear. Well, as clear as it can make it. Because any sane person's reaction to their website is immediate sensory overload. It's like looking at a child's 20 different art projects all mixed into one big presentation for the whole school to see. While confusing and jarring, most of the first page is relatively normal, or at the very least, related to weddings, dresses, and things like that. It states details like, Yvette's has many prom gowns to choose from and lots of shoes. Come see us. Tuxedo rentals starting at $65. Yvette's has plus sizes. Click here. But mixed in with all of that are other sections that either seem random, cryptic, or straight up creepy. Many of them are also a link. The first page alone has 15 to 20 links that lead to other pages where things really start to spiral into absurdity. The first one that really sticks out to me is the one that says psychological thriller. Please click here. Immediately, I am greeted by a drawing underneath a heading that says Gothic Horror, which couldn't be a better fitting title for this picture. It's a sketch, seemingly done in pencil, of a character with crazy hair, whose mouth is wide open as if they are screaming. They look terrified, insane, like a demon is coming after them. It's definitely not the creepiest thing I've ever seen, but in the context that I'm on a bridal shower website, it is pretty off-putting. But that picture is just the beginning. This section of the website looks to be a pitch or summary or advertising of some sort of a book called The Flaming Page. But before it gets to the details of that, the creator behind all of this has a couple mysterious paragraphs that ramble on to a point I'm not sure anyone can make sense of, but there's themes of space, aliens, and something called V8. The author writes, Salem witch trials. All they would tell us is that certain classified documents in the possession of a well-known psychiatric institution, which we will not name here, indicate that the site in question is part of a sociological experiment aimed at probing the truth about human nature, the truth about what is being done to humans on planet Earth, and the truth about government and corporate involvement therein. I write in agony, my sorrows fall like tears upon the page. V8 is everywhere. They are here. They move among us. The person you are sitting next to at this very moment could be one of them in disguise. Trust no one, V8. Over the coming days, weeks, months, years, decades, centuries, millennia, and beyond, there shall be vast additions to what you uncover, discover, plunder, infiltrate, and expose here. So stay tuned to Yvette's for the continuing upload, publication, and propagation of Yvette's radical real-time explorations of reality and beyond. V8. I don't know about other viewers who have browsed Yvette's Bridal, but that makes zero sense to me. And then to consider that this is all apparently from the owner of a bridal store, the whole thing feels even more unsettling. It looks and feels like a fever dream, one that I'd like to wake up out of, but it only continues into more madness. The first link underneath all of that is titled Alien Abduction, please click here. And it leads into what looks like the first page of the previously mentioned Flaming Page. They give a brief description of the book. It's about someone named Bart Fitzgerald Chamberlain, who claims to have been abducted by aliens, but is believed by no one other than his 17-year-old neighbor. It feels like classic sci-fi, and not that crazy of a story for a book, but again, I thought I was on a bridal store website, which is something I am reminded of, even when I'm scrolling through all of this. Each page has some mention of Yvette in the shop. Things like this are scattered all over. Yvette has a passion for fashion. Yvette cares about you. Yvette wants you to be happy. Yvette treasures the opportunity to serve you. But just behind it will be a drawing of an alien, an eccentric portrait of someone in a wedding dress, or some other piece of creepy artwork. The contrast between everything is disturbing. It raises the question of whether or not Yvette is really behind this. And if she is, how does she own a store? And is she actually running a business? Searching up Yvette's Bridal Shop, Panama City, brings up a Yelp page, which does seem legit. There's photos that look similar to the ones on the website, and the site itself is even connected to it. There's even one review. Absolutely amazing. I've gotten so many dresses from here, and would absolutely recommend to anyone at all looking for dresses to go here. Other images come up on the search of people trying on dresses inside the store, and everything seems very real. There's no information about the owner, however. No inside details from residents of the town or neighboring businesses. While the store does look like it does exist and has customers, the website still remains a mystery. There are multiple posts made about it on Reddit though. Most are on web design subreddits, and their aim is to make fun of how poorly the site is made, which is true, but that's not my main concern. It could be made well, but all the talk on alien abduction, the rambling in gibberish, and the artwork are what is the most alarming and confusing about it. But scrolling through some of the posts and comments, there seem to be a couple different explanations that people have come up with. One of these is underneath a post titled Yvette's Bridal Formal, a website so badly designed your retinas will attempt to detach themselves in horror. User Alleged Legacy comments, it's actually not a joke. 4chan board X discovered Yvette's a while ago, and they are 100% serious alien conspiracy theorists. A couple of guys from X actually drove out there and talked with them and took some pictures in front of the place. The Yvette's site blogged about it later, but I'd be damned if I can find anything on that site. Apparently, they told them that they were from an online magazine looking to investigate the link between the US government and aliens, and the Yvette's people talked with them, warily, for a good length of time. And for everyone watching, if you'd like me to go out and drive up to Yvette's Bridal Formal in real life, I will do it if this video reaches 41,000 likes. 40,000 likes, that works. And I'll go out and interview Yvette's Bridal Formal or whoever owns it. I think that'd be very interesting for a video, but everyone watching, you heard the like goal, so yeah, please like if you'd like to see that in the future. But anyways, let's continue. Now, this user didn't want to comb through Yvette's site, and neither do I. But luckily, other users did, and they found the specific post about this interaction between the owners and the 4chan user. And the post reads, January 7th, 2009. A very unusual and exciting event occurred at Yvette's today. Two guys who claimed to be from UFO magazine stepped through the door around 4:30 p.m. They didn't leave me with their card or show me any credentials, so maybe they weren't who they said they were. Maybe they were space aliens disguised as investigative reporters. This information points to the thought that maybe all that alien talk wasn't just related to a book or a fictional story, but is real to whoever is behind this. But things aren't as simple as that, if you can even call that simple. Because while one end of the internet is coming up with this conclusion, which are from posts made 17 years ago in 2010, there are more recent theories which could go in a completely different direction. One of those is connected